Audio Unleashed.
I wasn't recording when you said do it live, so none of this matters. We got to come up with a new way of easing into this.
Well, do we have to ease into every episode? Can't we just say this is the, what are we called again? Audio Unleashed. And we talk about audio.
Sure, let's do it, man. That's zippy. That was some pizzazz right there,
what
buddy.
They already know. Telling the listeners what they already know is a heralded tradition in the world of radio and especially podcasting.
I thought we were supposed to tell them what they're going to hear.
Well, the first thing they're going to hear. See, I'm jumping on this.
Yeah,
I'm responding like a semi-professional. The first thing we're going to hear is, I think this is going to be new for us. This will be the first utterly shameless promotion that we have on here of something that one of us is doing. But hell, if Marc Maron can do it, so can we. This is the Audiophile Society headphone test disc. It really should be called test album. It's not a disc. You can't get it on CD. It's only download. So this is a project I worked on at the behest of David Chesky, famed audiophile album producer and jazz musician and classical, opera composer and all sorts of stuff. And this turned out to be a much longer project than I expected. And it turned out to be a lot more interesting than I expected because I had to learn a lot of stuff to do this. And I learned a lot in the process of doing this.
Yeah.
And in the process of working with David Chesky for, 3 or 4 months on this, something like that. So we'll dig into that. And then we are going to discuss what, Dennis?
We are going to discuss a post that Sean Olive posted on Facebook. I saw him make mention of this. It's from headphones.com. And it's an article by Griffin Silver. And it's called Soundstage is Much More Complicated Than You Think. He's talking about the concept of soundstage and headphones. Basically, sort of the presentation of the music out in front of you, left to right. What causes that? How can you measure it? Are people saying things about it that aren't true? We're going to dive deep into that. And this is a long article, so we're going to have a lot to say, but I think it plays right into, in a lot of ways, the headphone test disc thing that you did, the project that you did, especially with regard to the Dolby stuff,
Because I should have said, it's it's not just headphone test, it's an immersive headphone test disc. So this is, Chesky came out with headphone test discs, years ago, but this is, for the immersive world. So, so it does
the full title completely. Is Audiophile Society's Headphone Evaluation and Spatial Audio Test Album. So
there we go. Good.
That's a mouthful. But hey, see, it is called album. It's not called disc.
Okay, well, I just wrote it as disc. We went back and forth between calling it disc or album, and then we just decided to call it album. So whatever.
There you go.
So after that, you sent me this great video from Gene DellaSala of Audioholics titled Loudspeaker Crossover Upgrades. Are they worth the effort? And this is basically a response to Danny Ritchie, who basically does these crossover upgrades and does these YouTube videos, great YouTube videos that have like a teardown of the speaker. And he basically, people will send him, I don't know, a Bowers and Wilkins or Focal or who knows what speaker, and he will fix or modify the crossover and upgrade it with fancier parts. So Gene looks at, do these fancier parts actually make a difference in a crossover? And he did a really bang up job on this. And we are going to discuss this in depth, which is what we do here on Audio
Unleashed.
Yeah. And then for our Patreon segment, what are we going to do?
For our patrons, we've got an article that you sent me from CE Critic, which is a website we talked about a few weeks ago. FTC cracks down new rules for audiophile reviews. And it's not just for audiophile reviews. This is just, new FTC regulations as a whole. There's also a blog post from Michael Adelson, I think is how you pronounce it. Adelson.
Adelson, probably.
Lawyer for the FTC. I'm familiar with his work because he does a lot of writing about the law with regard to AI. So it's funny seeing his name pop up in something that actually applies to me. But the FTC did a blog post. We'll pay you to give our new rule a good review. And so this isn't just audiophile reviews. This is any review of a consumer product, and we're going to break down what these new rules are, and what effects they might have on the industry, what effects they might have on us, and whether or not we think it's a good or bad thing. So yeah. But first, let's talk about you, Brent.
Let's talk about me. One of my favorite subjects. Now I get very quickly bored talking about me. This is why I don't go on dates anymore. It's just so boring. Blah 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 blah. But this is not really about me. This is about a project I worked on. So I've known David Chesky for since the mid 1990s, and have worked with him before on at least a few different projects. As putting together like a special compilation disc for him, or
you and I did one of those together with Steve.
Yeah, that was the one I'm talking about. Yeah, the home entertainment one. I did a DVD audio test disc when I was at Dolby working with him. I did something else. I can't even remember what it was. I mean, I've known the guy forever. Love the guy. He's a great guy. And his recordings are just so great. It's just essential listening for audiophiles, I think. He is my favorite of all the audiophile recording guys, because he combines a purist approach with whatever it takes to get it to sound great, right? He's not purist. He has a purist element to it. There's always a stereo mic pair or something, or a capsule mic with 4 or 5 capsules, or a dummy head or whatever, right? But so there's always that, but then he adds to it as needed. So this is really special. He started out with, I think about 2 years ago, he started out with this mega dimensional sound, which is basically, he was, during the pandemic, he couldn't go record places. So he started doing stuff on a digital audio workstation. And I still don't know what he does. He hasn't shared it with me, but he makes these super immersive sounding recordings, but without using Dolby Atmos or DTSX or any of those technologies. And so he wanted to make an immersive test album, which doesn't exist to my knowledge or his knowledge. And he called me up to see if I could do, he knows I'm good at generating test tones and things like that. And so he called me up to see if I could work on this with him. And I said, yes, immediately. Because it's David Chesky. So, but this ended up being a super deep dive into me figuring out how to do this. And, I'm familiar with how Atmos works. I'm certainly familiar with digital audio workstations, because that's what we use to produce this podcast, as well as my albums. But I had not ever mixed anything in Atmos. I'd seen it done a few different times, but I'd never actually done it. So I had to go find out how to do it. I ended up using 3 different digital audio workstation packages. I used various plugins, and the more I dug, the more the deeper I talked, the worse I got into it. To quote a line from King Crimson. But so what we ended up with is a whole series, and there were months of experimentation to try to figure out what would work, and me basically sending clips, and I sent some of them to you. And various other people, to David, and David sent some to engineers he knew, and a whole lot of people listening to him and figuring out what works, what doesn't. I did a whole round of, this is all, so I generated these all in the digital audio workstation, but, they're basically me editing recordings of like David doing a voiceover and David playing like percussion instruments, but me manipulating it to sort of turn it into a test tone. And I did a bunch of recordings at my local library, because they have a big giant room you can just go borrow from them. And I just did so much stuff. And we must have gone through, at least 6 iterations of this thing, maybe 8.
Yeah.
So
let's talk a little bit about, what is on the disc, and what are people who are, not on the disc, what is in the album? What are these tracks? Because it says 42 tracks of tests and music. I think we can, let's ignore the 10 tracks of music. I think people understand what that is. But these test tracks, like, what are they? What are people going to hear? And what is that going to help them determine about the quality of their headphones?
Well, there's a bunch on there. So we pre-encoded this thing, right? I produced everything in Atmos, or all the test materials I produced in Atmos. And then rather than, encoding them in Atmos, like distributable Atmos files, which we didn't want to do. We wanted something that people could easily play on their phones, and without having any special software. So we encoded everything using headphone binaural encoders. And Dolby has one built into the Atmos software. But then Apple has their own binaural encoder, which is built into Logic, and which I think they licensed to a couple other people. I've seen some other software programs that claim to have it. So with Apple Logic, their $200 digital audio workstation that's been used to produce an awful lot of albums, including like the Billie Eilish stuff and all that. You can go in there and do a bunch of Atmos productions and then select, do you want to encode it with Dolby, the Dolby encoder, or do you want to use the Apple encoder? And I kind of thought like, oh, there's no difference. It doesn't matter. And then, so I was assuming, so David like emails me, right? And says, hey, have you compared the Apple and Dolby encoders? There's a big difference. And like when David Chesky says there's a big difference, I have grown to believe like, okay, it's a very subtle difference, right?
Right.
Like what I probably won't
a very subtle
about.
difference that means a lot to David, right?
Means a lot to David, but I'm like, who cares? But this was like, once I actually did it, it was like, whoa. And so we have a bunch of things in there with discrete tones on it that have, channel IDs, like, 15 degrees to the right and 30 degrees up or something like that, right? Or, 90 degrees directly overhead or 180 degrees directly behind you. And what we found as we were passing these things out, and I think this will tie into our next segment as well, different people had very different reactions.
Yeah.
And, David was saying, you can't get a solid rear image out of headphones. And I'm listening to him like, David, I hear a solid rear image.
Yeah.
I don't hear a front image at all, but I hear a solid rear image. And he didn't. Yeah. But he's got different ears, we all have different ears. So it was just frustrating and fascinating to keep re-encoding, trying different things. But we also have direct comparisons of the Apple and Dolby encoders, which is really interesting. I think that the Dolby people and the Apple people, I assume they've done this, but this is the first, to my knowledge, published comparison of these things. It's also, to my knowledge, the first published set of test materials to where you can actually gauge how well your headphones will reproduce Atmos. I mean, I think it's not any, look, we've all, you and I, and probably most of our listeners have actually tried a multi-channel Atmos system with speakers in the ceiling and things like that, right?
Yeah.
But we've listened to it also, most Atmos listening is probably, Atmos music listening certainly is probably on headphones. And this really revealed a lot of the limitations with that. And as I was going through this, I kind of thought like, boy, Dolby is really overstating what this technology can do.
Yeah.
And I mean, you hear it, but it's kind of like, it doesn't, if you look at the Atmos marketing materials, is it applicable to a full home theater system with ceiling speakers? Absolutely, right? Is it applicable to headphones? That is a stretch.
Yeah.
And but we also had David sent me one of his tunes that he had done in a digital audio workstation from his album Graffiti Jazz, which I just love. I mean, David as a jazz artist is super creative and super fun to listen to. I think probably unheralded because I think people think, oh, he's a record company guy. And he also composes operas and all sorts of stuff. So people don't take him, I think, as seriously as a jazz artist as he should be taken. But he sent me some stuff off Graffiti Jazz, like one of my favorite tunes on there. And he said, okay, here's all the tracks for it. Now remix it in Atmos and then output it through, and kind of get like as close as you possibly can to what I did. And I spent a couple of days mixing this track, trying to emulate what David did. And then I put it out and, encoded it with the Apple encoder and Dolby encoder. And and you can hear this comparison on the album. And it kind of makes me feel like David should maybe like license whatever he's doing and sell it as his own plugin or something, because in my view, it worked. It sounded better than the Atmos. Now, granted, it was him mixing versus me mixing, and it was, how much time did he spend on that? I don't know. Maybe weeks, maybe an hour. I spent 2 days. So, and then, I had to move on. I got a job, I got a podcast. So, Anyway, you can download this for, I think it's $25 or something. And it's in 2448 high res. And you can listen to this through any set of headphones, any source, any phone, any DAC, anything will handle this. You can put it on a portable player, and you can test all your different headphones with it and see which ones give you the best immersive effects. Yeah. And it's also got just some regular headphone test stuff on there, like high frequency tests. It's got, we did CTA 2010 bass tones, like we use for subwoofers, but it was really fun to put those on headphones and see what your headphones actually do with discrete bass tones like this. It is, it can be pretty, because every headphone says, we're 15 hertz or to 40 kilohertz or 20 hertz to 30 kilohertz or something. But when you hear what these things actually do at 20 hertz with a high level test tone, you get a much more accurate picture of what your headphones are really doing.
Yeah. I'm looking over some of the images that I sent you now, because when you sent me your test files and was like, just tell me what you're perceiving here. Yeah, I really struggled with it. And one of the ways that, and I don't know if this is good or bad or what, but one of the ways that I tried to sort of qualify what I was hearing was I took a 360 degree vector, and basically I would just play the test tones and draw an oval or a circle or whatever where I heard that test tone. And I'm looking at them now, and it's like with my Odyssey LCD2s, that was the only one where I could get anything behind my head. And the 135 degree rear was I don't know, pretty good. Like I actually have got it at 120 degree rear or something like that. But it's funny, the front soundstage is kind of all over the place, but where my Beats Fit Pro, really great front soundstage, but it couldn't put anything behind my head whatsoever. It's funny. I'm remembering a lot about this test now, just looking at my images. My AKGs, the K371, I think is the one I've got, got really diffuse in the front soundstage, but then the heights are very precise, because one of the things I did is small tight circle if it's a very, very, specific image. But if I'm just kind of having to wave my hand and it's kind of somewhere up over here, I would draw a larger, more diffuse oval. Maybe we ought to put these images on our Patreon page or something like that for patrons to look at, just to get a sense of how all over the place it was, but how different it was based on which headphones I was using.
But it's a good headphone test in that way. I mean, that you can compare different headphones and really see. I mean, you can listen to music and get an impression of that, but this lets you really narrow it down. And I should also add that probably the funnest and most challenging thing on there is we put 2 blind tests on there where we just play the tones, and then you have to write down where you think they're coming from. And then there's a PDF guide that you download with it, and then you go check the PDF guide to see where they actually came from. Oh, that's tricky. And we did different tests for the Apple and Dolby encoders. And I think you heard the Apple versus Dolby, right? It sounded a lot different to you?
I did. It sounded radically different, shockingly different.
Yeah. And you really wouldn't think it does. I just look, it's audio, man. If people say, oh, I've got a new technology, I'm like, yeah, it's not any better than the old technology. Right. Yeah. But in this case, I think you might agree. It's hard to say which is better, but they are very different.
Yeah.
But anyway, boldly exploring new things in headphone sound, something or another.
I think our next article that we're going to dig into is probably going to give some really good perspective on why things sounded so radically different between the people you used to do the testing and the headphones that they were using. So you want to take a break and get some water and then dig into that?
Let's do it.
All right, we'll be right back. And welcome back. This is Audio
Unleashed.
And this time around, we're talking about an article that plays into our first topic, as we said, but this is from headphones.com. This is an article by Griffin Silver. And I found out about this article because Shawn Olive posted about it on Facebook. Mm-hmm. As I said in the intro, the premise is basically this. Soundstage is a sort of audiophile term that is one of the few that has permeated into sort of the mass market consciousness, right?
Yeah.
Everybody kind of understands what soundstage is. They kind of know it's important. And if a normie is going to spout audiophile language, that's probably the thing they're going to be talking about. And they want headphones with good soundstage. I'm giving a little bit away here, but well, let me back up. Let me back up and get to him laying out his premise. He talks about what soundstage is with regard to speakers, right? And then he talks about, okay, well, what does it even mean with regard to headphones? He talks about, in open space, the way we know that a sound is coming from our left is the interaural time difference. If it arrives at our left ear before our right, we know it's coming from the left. If it's louder in our left ear than the right, we know it's coming from our left. And also, when we're listening to sounds in open space, the head-related transfer function comes in. So if we hear a sound and it's on our right, then our left ear is going to color that sound differently. It's basically going to alter the frequency response. So in open air, that's another way that we use to spatialize things. We don't hear a sound and go, oh, that sound is colored. Our left ear hears it and goes, oh, that's coming from the right then, or behind me, or what have you. But of course, none of that applies to headphones. So what does make this effect of soundstage in headphones? And I'm not going to give away the whole article because goodness gracious, it'd take us an hour just to dig into this. But, he talks about diffuse localization. He talks about, what was the other metric that he used? Spaciousness, I guess.
Yeah. He talks about a lot. This is a long article, but it's well written. It's not like an AES. It's not like a typical AES paper. It's
yeah, we don't need AI to digest it. Yeah,
right. So he did a good job on this, and he really. But it's long. It's definitely it might be TLDR, but it's not. It is not confusing or anything.
Right. He goes into something that Artings is using basically to determine they give a score to everything, right? They give it a score to I don't know whether or not this thing sounds good with rainforest music or something, but he's attacking one thing in particular which is their soundstage metric, which relies on the pinna-related transfer function. And I was hoping I could get
Dennis?
you. Well, that's what I was about
I have
to ask
say
you.
what it is. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted you to explain that to me. Yeah.
Okay, so as I understand it, they basically, I think probably everybody who measures headphones has done things like this at some point. You put a speaker, you take your headphone measurement apparatus, right, which has these, microphones and little ear simulators that have a couple of resonators inside them, right? These little tiny cylinder things, right? And then you attach a rubber fake ear to it, right? So I think what they do is they try to see what the effect of this is number crunching for me here. So they're placing a speaker at 30 degrees, and let's say it's in the right channel. I don't know what it is. And they measure the sound coming off of that without the fake ear, and then they add the fake ear. So that gets the effect of your pinna, which is part of your head-related transfer function that lets your ears and brain localize sound. It's not the whole thing. It's part of it. And by gauging the difference with the pinna and then with the thing off and then applying that to the headphones, I guess they're going to write in and get pissed off at me because I am not explaining this correctly, but I'm kind of in there. But they try to gauge how the headphone interacts with your head-related transfer function, or HRTF, to give some kind of measurement of how spacious the headphone's going to sound. And I think the gist of it's correct. I'm as they're starting to say in politics, I'm directionally correct.
Oh,
but,
boy.
he's pointing out here that, like, okay, they're doing this measurement, but it doesn't really, in his experience, it doesn't really predict spaciousness. Now, I have not dug into, I respect both of these publications, headphones.com and Artings, right? They're both out there fighting the good fight, okay? And they're spending money on measurement gear, and they're both digging in deep.
Yeah.
But he's criticizing Artings here for basically drawing too firm a conclusions from their measurements.
And it's not just spaciousness that they'll claim. It's soundstage accuracy. That's what this kind of related transfer function.
I'm not even sure what that is.
Yeah.
Because how do you know? Let's say you're I don't know, international jazz star Brent Butterworth, and having sold albums, downloads in numerous foreign countries, like one per country. I'm international.
Was it Texas?
No, like Poland. I mean, we get random downloads from countries because, if you're an audiophile writer, people all around the world read you. And they become aware of your work and they buy your downloads with any luck. Yeah. I'm like most recording artists, I use fake reverb, right?
Yeah.
So what's the accuracy of the soundstage on that? I don't know. I mean, now if you're doing a really purist recording, like I think, most classical recordings you could say are purist. I mean, some of them use multi-miking, but by and large, they're kind of purist. And then there's audiophile labels. People like Todd Garfinkel. Darn it, I can't remember his label. It's really good recordings, though. And he uses, to my knowledge, like really purist technique, and a few others do. But if you have that and you know what the venue looks like, and you know where the instruments were placed in the venue, maybe you can have some kind of idea of what soundstage accuracy is. But for 99.99% of recordings, it's just an utterly meaningless term.
Yeah. We've already pointed out that this is a really, really long article, but there is a passage that I wanted to zoom in on and just directly read. I thought this was great. And this was ultimately what made me think, oh yeah, we got to talk about this. So he comes right out and says, this score is actively harmful, which, dang, shots fired. But he goes on to say, Artings claiming that frequency response colorations from one head is somehow a robust predictor of all people's experience of headphone soundstage is pretty obviously false once the claim is challenged with data. The problem is that no one has publicly given the counter argument till now. What Artings has offered here is an under-researched, scientific, seeming explanation about something that is much more complex than a single measurement on a single head could ever hope to capture. Bam. That is the whole point. That's you want your TLDR, that's it.
Yeah, if anything, our experiences with producing that Audiophile Society headphone immersive sound album confirmed that, because everybody got different results.
Right.
Of course, even sometimes people using the same headphones like you and I were. And so, he's 100% right. Now, I don't fault Artings for, look, I think most people that are good at measurement do some experimental measurements, and sometimes they correlate well. Ideally, you would take that measurement, you would correlate it to listening tests, right? And then you would say, hey, it correlates to the listening tests, or no, it doesn't. Okay, like if you took SINAD, signal to noise and distortion, and try to coordinate that with listening test data, you can't, because beyond a very poor level of performance, people can't hear that difference. Right. But, I've done it with, for Wirecutter, we have an average noise canceling rating that I came up with. And I did this several years ago at Jeff Morrison's request, where, I went on to a bunch of planes and I was doing that a lot then. I measured, the actual sound that was in planes and the bandwidth of it and the level of it and all that stuff. And I came up with a, kind of an average noise canceling rating. I called it the Wirecutter average noise canceling rating, which is an acronym that spells wanker, but they didn't like that. So we don't use that. I still call it wanker, but whatever. But it works. And then I had people come into my house and I played, airplane sound through my surround sound system and had people try different headphones. And lo and behold, it worked. Okay. So, and that's the same as what Harman does.
Yeah.
When they came up with the Harman curve, they did listening tests with people, found out what they liked, measured the headphones, and figured out, if this measurement correlates with what people are probably going to like in a headphone. So I don't get the impression Artings. Now, granted, I haven't read everything on Artings. It's a big website. I don't get the impression they really did that. I think they basically kind of loosely put together this measurement, which granted, a lot of people have done this. I've done it at times. But they've made bigger claims for it than can be merited by subjective testing.
Yeah.
But he's got so much good stuff in there. He talks about the things that affect the perception of spaciousness in a headphone. I mean, this is such a giant article. I mean, he has a really intelligent discussion of how, when people put on open back headphones, they tend to report those as sounding more spacious or having a bigger soundstage or whatever than closed back headphones. That has been my experience too in both, blind testing and, the normal sort of just subjective headphone testing I do. And I think there's been a lot of speculation as to why that is. In terms of some of these things having a, necessarily different frequency response and blah, blah, and this and this. But he kind of ties it into the occlusion effect, which is where when your ears are closed in with closed back headphones, it kind of messes up your ability to perceive spaciousness because your ear's not used to that. Your ear's not normally occluded. And so with the open back headphones, your ear is, only lightly occluded. Most of those things leak sound in like crazy. And so you have a more subjective impression of spaciousness. It doesn't screw your ears up as bad as closed back headphones. Although there's closed back headphones that sound pretty spacious. But, this was just a really good article. I mean, I really want to go in and read it again and read it like deeper and kind of, I just think it's really well thought out. It's talking about a lot of things that people have not talked about. And, there's been some sort of loose discussion of spaciousness in headphones, but not enough. And that's why doing that test album was so revelatory to me. I mean, I knew people have different perceptions of spaciousness, but to actually come out with discrete test tones from a specific point in space and trying to hear that and hearing how people perceived it so differently was kind of like, okay, now we know. I mean, if we ran that blind test with people, it would be really fun to see how many of them get the different ones right. And then we'd actually have data. Hey, somebody could do this. Hey, some student out there in engineering, you could make this your master's thesis. I'm not kidding you. I've had doctoral theses written about my work, usually trashing it, but which is fine. Fair enough. But because my work is not done on the pace of a doctoral thesis. It's done in a rush and with very limited resources. I don't have a year to do it. But somebody could, there's so much work left to do in audio. And that's why I'm often impatient with people that worry about audible differences between amplifiers and stuff. It's like, there's so much stuff you could explore that makes a difference.
And there's so much stuff that we have not figured out that we might not figure out. You and I often say that the language of science is uncertainty. This article embodies that principle better than any I've read in a long time because he lays out the things that we do know. And then he says, all right, buckle up because we're going into unexplored territory here. We're about to talk about a whole lot of I don't knows, but here's what I think. And I love the way he differentiates between the two. But I did want to back up to about the halfway point of the article and highlight another passage that I thought was great and goes back to why I think this article is so important and why I think this is more than just him beefing with Artings. it's this approach to scoring soundstage also goes some way to denying people who have divergent experiences. Mm-hmm. If someone ended up really enjoying the soundstage of the Sennheiser Momentum 4 wireless, Arting's fairly negative score for this headphone soundstage might end up causing the listener to erroneously second guess themselves. And I think that's great. But another thing that I love about this is that he does a really good job of highlighting those individual idiosyncrasies without devolving into, well, we all hear different. If you love it, then it's great. That is a fine line. And he sort of straddles it really, really wonderfully. And I thought it was a neat trick that he pulled off there to talk about the differences between the way we hear without going into complete mi-fi territory. That was a neat trick.
Yep, it was. He just did a great job. This is a great article. This is my one of my picks for best article of the year.
Oh, dang. Very nice.
Along with my own article about face scrubbers on Wirecutter. That was a great one, too.
I'm not sure if you're kidding or not.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's probably a good place to stop, get a drink of water, and come back and talk about crossovers, man.
We will, right after this music clip.
Yeah.
Hey, welcome back. This is Audio
Unleashed.
Boy, that was a little slow on the draw.
Sorry.
Pay attention.
I was paying attention.
This is podcasting. This is sort of semi-professional podcasting.
I was trying to get in the groove, man. I was trying to match your energy, and that required a bit of relaxation, man.
Yeah, good luck matching my energy, pal. So
I don't think my heart could handle it. Yeah.
No. So we're going to talk about Gene DellaSala, the founder of Audioholics, and this great video he posted. Was this 13 days ago? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Not too long ago. We're actually on top of it for a change.
And is that what's considered on top of it in Audio Unleashed world? We're only 2 weeks late to the party.
For us, doing it within 2 months is pretty good. But
it's true.
So anyway, so Gene did this, and this is obviously spurred by the very existence of GR Research and Danny Ritchie, who
and also a video by Andrew Robinson.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you're going to have to remind me what Andrew Robinson said. What did he say?
I don't know, man. I didn't watch his, but he did a video about, do the parts inside of your speakers even matter? And that prompted Danny Ritchie to do a video responding to him going, yeah, they're the most important thing in the entire world. And I think Gene is basically coming in going, guys. let's talk about this in real terms. So,
well, let's I'll just say that, Andrew Robinson is not known for his technical acumen. And he's a very successful audio YouTuber.
Yeah.
But Danny Ritchie is, although he's controversial, as we have talked about before. And Gene DellaSala incontestably is known for his technical acumen, I think. And he's been doing, he's one of the very first people to do an audio website. And they've been doing measurements and...
Yeah, he doesn't call people who don't believe in $9,000 power cords leftists, which gives him a little bit of a leg up over Danny to me. So
right, that's true. Yeah. Gene's pretty balanced in his. He also, Gene's kind of like us in the sense that he's skeptical of audiophile stuff, but he doesn't trash it either. Right. Once in a while he does, but I think Gene's pretty open-minded. And I've actually worked with Gene a little bit. We kind of I think he was part of a group of people who kind of unofficially codified the CTA 2010 standard. It was CEA 2010 standard back then for subwoofer measurement, because lots of people were coming up with different results, and the spec did not have adequate instructions on how to do the measurement. And we kind of all worked together, and that's when he and I kind of became friends, is working together on that and realizing like, hey, we're in the same place. And he actually ended up using some of my measurements for some of his guides and stuff.
Very cool.
Good stuff. Anyway, so why don't you talk about what Gene said?
Well, rather than doing that, I want to start by talking about how he said it, or how he delivered the message, because
in English, right?
Well, yeah, that's a good point. But one of my favorite things about this video is that he did not assume prior knowledge. And he gives one of the most cogent explanations I've seen on YouTube of what is a crossover? What does it do? How does it work? What are the components that make it? And let's break down like a three-way speaker and show you what comprises the crossover, how it's made, and how it's designed. Because all of that is pertinent to the message that follows. Like, do the component pieces of that matter? Do these upgraded parts, like how do they affect how a crossover works? If you just want to simply understand what the heck people even mean when they say a loudspeaker crossovers, start here, right? Because this is 101, man. He lays the ground floor before he starts getting into the specifics, and he does a great job of it.
Yeah. So what he's talking about specifically is, what Danny Ritchie does is two things. He sells upgraded crossovers with parts that are considered by audiophiles to be better. He also sells crossovers that are perhaps wiser in design than what the original engineers did.
Right.
And speaker engineers screw up crossovers all the time. It's quite common. Probably less so now than it was 20 years, certainly less so now than it was 20 years ago, but it still happens a lot. And as you can find from watching Danny's videos. But what Gene wants to do here is go into it without, Danny's got something to sell. So he's got a built-in bias and sort of conflict of interest. But Gene doesn't. And, he goes in there and examines and talks about the variations in these different parts and why some of them, spending money on film capacitors rather than electrolytic capacitors. Spending money on air core inductors rather than iron core inductors.
Right.
And he talks about all the different effects that these things could have. And he talks about tolerance, which is, the amount of, the accuracy of the rating of it. Like if you have let's say a resistor that's rated at, 33 ohms, a really high quality resistor will be plus minus 1% or 2%, but some of them may be 5%. And certainly when you get into capacitors, you can get into plus minus 10%, plus minus 20%. And so your speaker's frequency response can be greatly affected by that. And your left and right speakers can maybe not match, and sounds can start to pull. Look, if your left speaker has, a spike in the treble because of this capacitor being out of whack, you could have sounds starting to pull to the left that are supposed to be centered. I've heard that.
Right.
Heard it actually several times. What Gene really didn't talk about, though, is he kind of does this all in theory and based on measurements. What he doesn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he really talked about what these things sound like. And Danny doesn't really either. I mean, I always say that, the gold standard is listening test more than anything else. And, are loudspeaker crossover upgrades worth the effort? Well, I think obviously in some cases where you have and Gene talks about this, where you have a cheap speaker and you maybe want to put a little more money into it. There are expensive speakers where they cheap out on the parts because most people don't ever open it up and look at the crossover. I have dealt with that many times where I pulled open a speaker and it's got a really minimalist crossover because they figured no one would look. And the speaker, and you hear it in the speaker, it sounds bad. But whether or not,
He does show in a few places, though, like the effect, like here's the effect of this on frequency response of this specific speaker. And, you know, I mean, as you've said numerous times, frequency response of a speaker is one of the biggest determining factors of whether or not people are going to like it. So I think that would apply, you know, if these changes can affect frequency response, that is going to affect perceived sound quality.
But here's my question, though. What if you have, let's just say, film caps, you know, capacitors, versus electrolytic caps that are running within spec, right? That are specified to be whatever 47,000 K or whatever, you know, or no, not K, like 47,000 microfarads. I don't know what I'd have to go look at some crossovers to remember what the values are, but you know, and they're within 5% or something, and you know, you can certainly cherry pick parts and make sure that they're correct. Right. A lot of companies do that. But if you have a speaker with electrolytic caps that is within spec, and you have a speaker with film caps that is within spec, can you hear a difference?
I wouldn't think so.
I don't know. That's what is not dealt with here.
Yeah.
And somebody, you know, I could go look through all my AES papers, and since I'm an AES member, I can get all those thousands of papers for free. I should go. Somebody must have done that at some point, huh?
Must have done.
I mean, if I was a company making film caps for crossovers, I'd probably want to have some ammo like that and say, hey, we did these listening tests and we showed that our things sound better than equivalent electrolytics, or our, you know, air core inductors sound better than iron core inductors, or whatever. That's what we really have not quite established here. So, you know, it's just too bad that audio publications struggle so hard to make money, because there's so much room for more exploration and testing in audio, and we have some good science, but we still have a long way to go. And I used to do some of this stuff, and a few other people did, you know, where you do Harman type efforts to compare, you know, measurements and compare technical specs and things like that with blind listening tests. But, you know, it's just very rarely done. There's a lot of people that do measurements now, but not that many people that do really well-structured blind listening tests.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's disappointing to me. I mean, because it's fun, and it gives you, hey, look, you know, the blind listening test is the correct answer.
Yeah.
Okay. As long as it's reasonably well done. And I tell manufacturers that all the time, because they'll complain because their Bluetooth speaker didn't get picked in Wirecutter. And I'll say, hey, I blind tested it with people and they didn't like it. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to say, oh, well, our panelists didn't like it, but you should still buy it? I mean, you can't say that. Whereas you could say, hey, we measured this, but we still liked it. And that happens a lot. So, you know, but you can't, unless the tests were not done decently, you just can't refute that, in my opinion.
That's a good point. I mean, ultimately, that's all that matters, right?
Right. But, you know, Gene really does, I mean, he does really talk about, at least from a sort of theoretical standpoint, the clear differences that you can get with this and why it does matter. I'm still not entirely certain that if you're buying fancy parts that are, you know, fancy caps that are 4 or 5, 10 times the cost of generic caps, if it's actually any better than, you know, the generic parts. I don't know.
There's a lot of nuance in here. I mean, one of the things that I love about the video is Gene never quite devolves to the level of yes, good, no, bad. I mean, he talks a lot about, with nuance, I think he talks why may a manufacturer make the decision to use a more expensive part or a cheaper part? What consequences do those have? Can it be better? Can it be worse? And really, more than anything, more than sort of a bottom line answer of is it worth it? Is it not? I think the great thing about this video is by the time you get to the end of it, you just understand what these components are, what they do, and how they work.
Exactly.
Right?
And that is incredibly valuable.
yeah, that's where the real value in this video lies. I thought Gene just did an amazing job. And to see something in our industry done with knowledge, done with concision, and done with nuance, boy, that's just a neat trifecta right there. Yeah. So good job,
It's kind of
Gene.
like a YouTube, it's kind of like a YouTube version of the Loudspeaker Design Cookbook in ways.
Oh, yeah. Very nice. Yeah.
Something I've always wanted to do, but I'm getting too old.
Well, buddy, do you have anything else you wanted to say about this video?
I don't, but nice job. And I really like the fact that he plays it really straight here technically, and he doesn't do audiophile type claims of, you got to have, air core inductors because iron core inductors are just crap. Those are just cheap crap for bad speakers, and you got to have these. But he really kind of breaks it down where you can kind of understand why people might use expensive parts.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, you ready to do some credits, buddy?
I am ready to do some credits. I think
Cool.
This is a Butterburger production.
Good job.
Edited by
Me.
Dennis Berger.
Mm-hmm.
Music by both of us, because I don't have anything new. I'm too buried with Wirecutter updates right now.
Okay. Yeah, we'll dig into the greatest hits folder. Yeah.
Yeah. But we have lots. God, we probably have 20 tunes.
I need to count at some point. I need to make a spreadsheet is what I need to do.
Yeah, we need to. So to plan our album, our much requested album.
Yeah. Yep.
Of a whole lot of Ramones length weird pieces of music.
None of it as good as their version of the Spider-Man theme song, though.
No. What else? Any more credits?
I don't think so, buddy.
Anything at all? Okay.
No. Yeah.
Good.
I think we just say thanks to everybody for checking in with us, and we appreciate each and every one of you. But patrons, we got one more segment for you, so stick around.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. If you liked what you heard and wish there'd been a little bit more of it, we got some good news for you.
Indeed, we do. If you check out patreon.com/Audio Unleashed, all one word, you can get new episodes a little earlier than everybody else.
And sometimes it's like a day or two early. Sometimes it's nearly a week. We never really know until we start editing.
But the big plus is that you get extended cuts of every episode. And usually that's going to mean a whole extra segment that's about maybe a geekier topic or something that's a little more personal to us, or something that's just going to really appeal to the hardcore Audio Unleashed listener.
Yeah, what it boils down to is if you're somebody who would support Audio Unleashed on Patreon, we're going to make sure the bonuses to every episode are really aimed straight at your interests.
Yeah, and so if you want to hear these segments, you can subscribe to our Patreon for $3 a month, which is less than I spend every single day on my cup of coffee when I go to Starbucks to write my boring articles.
Yeah. One more time with that URL, that's patreon.com/Audio Unleashed.
Or Audio
Unleashed. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.